Hey guys, Spudknocker here, as always. And today we have a little bit of a different kind of video. We're going to go over a concept that I briefly touched on in my first impressions video for the Mariana Islands map. I've seen a lot of DCS World players kind of complaining a little bit about how little land there absolutely is on the Mariana Islands map. And they're kind of wondering, what kind of things can we really do with the Marianas map, with it being so much sea and so little land for, say, striking ground targets, things of that nature. However, we're now faced with the exact same challenges that many military planners from the United States, Australia, South Korea, the Republic of China, and Japan have been facing for a long time now, especially with the increasing rise of a more belligerent communist China. One of these concepts that I introduced in my last video was about the idea of using F-15E Strike Eagles as bomb trucks to deliver fully composed weapons to austere airfields for use on other aircraft. So that's what we're going to go over today. Today we have ourselves in a Marine Corps FA-18 Hornet that is, unfortunately, our pilot has been thrown directly into World War III against Communist China, and unfortunately, as would happen in real life, all of the improved air bases around the Pacific region have been heavily hit by ballistic missiles fired from the PLA. Now, in many of the islands across the Pacific, from the Spratly Islands to the Marshall Islands, the Gilbert Islands, and many, many more, have small airfields that were built back during the World War II era and were used intensely for military operations back in that era. Of course, many of them have fallen into disrepair. They do not have nearly the same kind of infrastructure that we see on modern airfields built for aircraft like the FA-18. As a result, the US military has kind of gone into thinking about how we can utilize these very austere locations far-flung across the Pacific region in order to rearm and refuel our fixed-wing aircraft in the event of a war with China, in which these improved airfields such as Andersen Air Force Base or Saipan International get completely and totally cratered by those PLA ballistic missiles. So let's go ahead and hop in the cockpit and get started with this interesting little concept that I think will help a lot of players out there come up with different ways to use the Mariana Islands map. Alrighty guys, well we're here back in the office of our FA-18C Hornet. And as you guys see, we're lacking a wingman. Things are not going well in the opening stages of World War III here. Ballistic missiles have been raining down upon every airfield with a built-up runway across the Pacific region, as I stated in our intro. As a result, we're going to have to figure out a way to resupply our fixed-wing aircraft and make sure that they do not just simply run out of gas and fall into the ocean, without contributing to the fight. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually turn on our TACAN, and we're going to punch in 76 X-ray. Here's our TACAN, and we've already been talking to the controller of the FARP that we're going to be using here. Now in real life, just like as we're doing today, the Northwest Airfield on Guam, that is actually situated right next to Andersen Air Force Base, has been used for extensive testing of this concept of how to actually bring these austere airfields online and then get aircraft refueled, rearmed quickly, and get them back up into the air. The idea here is that, of course, the PLA is going to be using satellite technology, ELINT technology, etc., to kind of track our F-18s, or F-16s, or F-22s, F-35s, etc., as to where they're going. And the idea is to get in, get rearmed, refueled quickly, and get the heck out of there before those PLA ballistic missiles start raining down on that newly used austere airfield. So because we've been talking to our controller down there, we know that we have a course line of 245 degrees for our final approach course to our austere airfield, as well as the fact that we have been notified that the touchdown zone elevation is 500 feet MSL. So we're going to approach the field and we're going to make a carrier break to get onto the ground as quickly as possible, get turned around, taxi up to the FARP, and then get rearmed, refueled, and get out of here right before those ballistic missiles start coming down on top of us. Now, for the most part, you can read different things about this concept, but for the most part, the idea is that aircraft such as C-130s would land and then prepare the area, such as doing, a quick FOD sweep across this austere airfield to make sure that there are nothing horrible that is potentially going to get sucked up into the intakes of those F-18s, F-35s, F-16s, F-15s, whatever it may be. And I got the reciprocal heading of our airfield's final approach course, so it's going to be 065. There we go. Turn it around. Alrighty. So the C-130s are going to swoop in, they're going to bring the personnel and the fuel that's required for these aircraft. And then aircraft such as F-15Es are then going to bring in the weapons. And somebody in the comments section of my last video thought that that was a completely terrible idea. But once we get on the ground and we take a look at our F-15Es that we have down there at the FARP already, we will talk about why it's actually a very fantastic idea. Alrighty, we can see Northwest Field right over here on the northwest tip of Guam. We're going to start coming down to our approach altitude as well as our approach airspeed and on course. I'm going to make sure we're all safed up, but we're going to leave the EW turned on just in case we have, say, PLAN fighters off of a Chinese aircraft carrier jump us for any reason. As we can see, we're pretty much empty in terms of all of our stores. We're completely Winchester at this point, and that's why we got to get on the ground, get some fuel, get some weapons, and get back up into the fight. You can see pictures in real life of this concept being fleshed out with aircraft like F-35s, F-15Es, F-16s, etc. at Northwest Field here. I don't believe that F-18s have actually completed this, but you can find plenty of pictures in real life of Marine Corps F-18s across the Mariana Islands conducting austere airfield drills. I just don't think that potentially they've been photographed here at Northwest Field. So we're going to approach this just like we'd approach a carrier. We're going to stay 1,000 feet over the land. Got to bring the nose up a little bit. There we go. Right at 350 knots. Looking down, we can see that, yes, in fact, that is quite the austere area down there. And we are, in fact, going to land on that thing. But it is clear of aircraft. The landing area is clear. And so we are in the brake. Got that speed brake out there. Really slow us down. Make sure we're trying to stay as level as possible in the turn. Coming into our reciprocal. Start a gentle rollout. You can see the airfield down there. Flaps down, gear down, starting to bring a little bit of power in, not too much. Start to ease off on the back pressure on the stick. Keep the aircraft slowing down so we get the velocity vector into the E bracket. A little bit of power. And we can see about 45 degrees, so we'll go ahead and start turning in. We're going to cage our HUD. We have quite the headwind, but that's going to really help us make sure we get a nice soft landing at this austere field. Now, even though we're flying an F-18 Hornet that's meant to land on carriers, a carrier is still a nice, smooth, perfect surface to land on, and this airfield here probably was used mostly to launch B-29s back in the day. So we want to make sure that we're trying to get as gentle and graceful of a touchdown as possible to avoid damaging our aircraft, so that way we can get ourselves back into the fight with these weapons and fuel brought by our C-130s and F-15Es. So we're getting lined up on final. We're a little bit high. I'm going to go ahead and uncage the HUD again. Gonna reduce the HUD brightness a little bit. That's gonna help us out, be able to see things a little bit better. Make sure we don't get too low over our FARP at the end of this old runway. Coming down into the jungle. Just adjusting my descent rate with my throttle. Not doing too much work with the stick at this point. Like I said, we're trying to go for as gentle of a touchdown as we possibly can. So we're going to hold throttle in all the way down to the touchdown. There we go. Speed brake out. Bringing the stick back for aero braking. On the brakes. Slowing ourselves down. And there you go. There's an F-15E landed on a World War II era airbase. So we're now going to pull in the speed brake and we're going to taxi back on the runway to our FARP. And you guys could see just how bumpy that runway is. And if you touch down too hard, like I've done in the testing for this video, you can very much flip the aircraft. You can get the aircraft to dig its nose wheel in and flip it over onto its back. That way, you can get the aircraft to kill you in a variety of ways on this very crappy old runway. Like I said, probably the heaviest use this runway ever got was back in the day launching B-29s on raids to the home islands. And we can see the detail that Eagle Dynamics put in the jungle here. It's pretty darn cool. It's a concept that countries that don't have any defense in depth, such as Taiwan, practice for a long time, and have practiced for a long time, as well as, of course, countries like Great Britain. The UK has always had kind of a nihilistic view of the Cold War, and that the actual reasoning behind the original building of the Harrier was quite cynical in the fact that it was made to take off from road bases or forest unimproved bases in West Germany with a single nuclear weapon to try and strike back against the Soviets in the event that the UK was wiped off the map in a first strike scenario by the Soviet Union. So again, we want to keep the taxi speed up a little bit. We don't want to taxi too fast on this very rough surface, but we don't want to get too slow because we don't want to get any soft spots in this old concrete to let our wheels sink in and potentially get stuck on those soft spots. And we can see we've got 2 Strike Eagles and 2 C-130s up here waiting for us. Let's go ahead and taxi over by these Strike Eagles so we can talk about why the Strike Eagle makes a fantastic bomb delivery tool. And you can see I'm having to use a little bit more power than I would if I were taxiing, say, on an aircraft carrier or at a nice, perfect taxiway surface at an airbase. So we got those 2 F-15Es right there. And first, let's go ahead and we will call up the ground crew. And we will get some weapons onto our aircraft. So hopefully we can fight our way to either a safe airbase or we can go on and bring the fight back to the enemy once again. All right, And while we're refueling and rearming, let's take a look at the F-15E over here on our right. So the idea of using the F-15E as a bomb delivery method is a really fantastic idea because the F-15E can carry a ton of ordnance. But most people don't really realize that the 3 upper weapon stations on the CFTs of an F-15E, they cannot drop smart weapons from those racks. They can be attached to those racks, but they cannot actually be dropped to them. Like, say if you have a JDAM, you cannot program coordinates for that JDAM to hit if it is on these 3 upper CFT stations on the F-15E. So as a result, the Air Force or somebody in the Air Force thought, hey, with this idea of austere airfield concepts, before, let's see, are we filling up? We are. Before, we had to bring the bombs broken down into their components on, say, a C-130, and then you had to have extra personnel put in the sweat and work to actually put those weapon components together, get them into a piece, and then load those weapons onto the aircraft itself. The bombs cannot be carried in a fully configured form inside of a C-130 due to safety concerns. However, because an F-15E is rated to carry those weapons fully put together, and even though it can't drop them from those upper CFTs in a combat scenario, if, say, an F-15 lands at an austere airfield like we are today, and say he's loaded up with a full complement of GBU-38s on all of his stations, he could carry one, so that's 6, 12, 13, 14, he could carry 15 GBU-38s, enough to arm a bunch of F-16s or a bunch of F-18s with GBU-38s. And those ground crew wouldn't have to spend the time to actually throw those weapons together, then get them onto the aircraft that are going to carry them into combat. And time is of the essence when we have PLA ballistic missiles about to rain down on us right here. So the idea of using the F-15E as that bomb delivery method is a really fantastic idea. It can do it in a very fast and very survivable way, so that way those weapons can get to where they need to be very, very quickly. The F-15E can also, of course, defend herself if, say, she got jumped by a PLAN, J-15 off of one of their aircraft carriers. So it's a really important concept that I think that could be a really cool, almost secondary job for F-15E pilots when the F-15E comes to DCS World. So we've got our refueling complete. Now it's time to get our weapons and hopefully get the heck out of here before those ballistic missiles start coming down on us. Yep, we can see our weapons are starting to populate. Alrighty, our rearming is complete and we are ready to get the heck out of here. So let's go ahead and push up the throttle. And as you guys could see there, it definitely took a little bit more throttle than I'm really comfortable with to actually get the aircraft to start rolling. And we can see that our runway up here is very, very bumpy. So I'm going to get nice and lined up. And I'm going to go over to my FCS page and take a look at my stab trim, which is, holy crap. Alright, so that should work. So we'll go for some stab trim of about 18 for this loadout that we are currently carrying, and we should be good to go. So at this point, just going to smoothly apply the throttle, get the aircraft to start rolling first, then apply the afterburners. Make sure we're tracking down the center line, nose wheel steering off. Some gentle back pressure on the stick. I want to make sure that we keep the nose off the ground as much as possible. And we're up in the air. We're flying, gear up. flaps up as well. And you'll see that you'll notice that I just took off with full flaps. I wanted to get the aircraft up in the air and off of that surface as soon as possible. And now we are ready to take the fight to the enemy once again, even though our airfield was completely demolished by those ballistic missile strikes thrown upon us from mainland China. I hope that this gave you guys some insight as to maybe some different scenarios that you could play with on the Marianas map, and some different things that you could do with it, as well as showed you guys that fighter jets can be more versatile than just being for use in direct combat, such as the concept of using that F-15E as a bomb delivery method. And of course, because this was just a test and just some training, there's beautiful Andersen Air Force Base with no damage. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys give us a like and a subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Fly safe out there and stay healthy, guys.